Welcome! I'm Tina Logassi from Heirloom Designs. I am a maker and my specialties are making decorative dolls and working with felt. I am here to share my knowledge and teach you techniques that I hope will help you on your way to create something awesome. So let's dive in. Struggling to turn out tight corners when working with tiny or intricate corners? Are you getting frustrated with blowing out your seams during the turning process? Let me show you how to do it and avoid common pitfalls. What I have here is a moon. I'll link to the pattern below, and it's a good example to show you how to use these tools because there's a lot of little corners, there's a little tooth here, kind of hard things to turn out, as well as the fact that this is incredibly long. So though it looks like it's a quick thing to work on, the stuffing of this alone can take 45 minutes. It's crazy. So I'm going to show you that. And then I also have a hand, because I find hands for me are the most challenging, and you might find that as well, because they can be so small to work with. So we'll go through that. But first I want to talk about fabric choice and stitch choice. So this is one of my favorite fabrics to use when I'm going to be working on an intricate pattern. It's a finely woven muslin, and it's virtually identical to a quality quilter's cotton, but much less expensive. I also find when I'm doing this type of thing, I will use quite a tiny stitch on my machine because that will help prevent the blowout. The tighter your stitches are, the stronger you're going to make that seam. If you had larger stitches, you could imagine how if you have a fine stuffing tool, it would literally just go straight through in between the stitches and cause an issue. Another important thing to do is in areas of strain. So on hands, I like to stitch back and forth in these little areas like in between the fingers. That's always helpful. And some people even go in and apply fray check around areas of strain to help strengthen the thread in that seam. Another thing that you can consider doing is actually sewing on your stitch line. So conventional patterns, as you know, they generally just show you and give you the outer seam, and then they tell you the seam allowance, and then you sew in from there. Well, when you're working with complicated shapes like this, and in doll making in general, most pattern instructions on challenging areas will actually give you the pattern of the line you're supposed to sew on. So what you actually do is you trace that pattern piece onto a piece of fabric like this, and then it gets cut out afterwards. It helps you get really precise with where your needle is going and you end up with a better final result. The other thing to consider is when you are working with an intricate pattern like this, you need to clip your seams. So this applies to anywhere that has tight curves. You can see this moon, I've already sewn, I've already cut it out, and I've left a small seam allowance, not probably about an eighth of an inch. And around these rounded areas, you definitely want to clip. That will help you with turning it and with having an accurate shape after you turn. And you can see I don't go right to the stitch line, but I do come close to it. If you don't do that, you end up with a lot of bunching in these corner areas, and you just don't get a nice finish, and you can't properly turn out these tight shapes. So the next thing I wanted to talk to you about are some options that you have for turning out seams. The classic and always handy is a set of turning tubes. You can see mine have been well used, and sometimes I use them for things that they're not supposed to be used for. So they bend. This one's got a little broken at the end, but I've had them for years. This is actually the one that I use to wind glasses around, and the wire I use for that has a little bit of natural grease on it, so it eventually has turned this a little discolored, but that's okay. That's it, and those are pretty much a standard size. This brand is Dritz, but when you buy a set of 3 turning tubes, they generally look like that, maybe different color. If you are working with some smaller hands and things that need turning, a set of mini turning tubes can be very helpful. Like, I would not be able to turn this out using these. I might be able to get this one up some of the spots, but if you're doing something smaller than this, you're going to want to consider these. Now, the only problem I find with these is because they're metal, like, it's been polished, but there is still a bit of sharpness, and you do have to watch that the metal doesn't tear through your fabric. And this guy, you can tell it's really hard to turn super tiny things because there's so much fabric that you're trying to push through a very small opening. So sometimes your tools do bend a little bit, but don't worry, they're still usable. So that's that. And this set I got from Doll Maker's Journey, and I will link to them below. They're the only ones I know that make a set that's really kind of meant for turning small doll parts. The other thing, these are hemostats, and I love them. I don't even know if I've ever used this small set. This set is not nearly as nice. It's harder for me to open and close it. I'm not sure if it's because it is so small. I don't find the size useful for me. However, I have two pairs that are this size, and again, I will link the size below. And these were also from Doll Maker's Journey. So these are traditionally used by surgeons in the hospitals, but they are one of the best tools for turning out. You can use them from anything from a simple thing that needs turning out that, with this, you don't want to fiddle with the two-part system. You just want to use one thing in one hand, and they're nice because they lock into place. And they're also very good for stuffing. Like, you can grab up a bunch of stuffing, go in there with it, pull out, and then keep going like that. So I actually use them quite a bit for stuffing funny areas. All right, so I'm going to put this one aside because that's sort of the more challenging one. And I'm going to start with this moon. So again, I have used a small stitch all the way around. I've clipped my tricky bits, which is kind of all around in here. And what I find with a shape like this that maybe has something very long, like even a doll arm, where you've got this long arm and this little hand down here, I will turn out maybe less than half of it and work at it from there so that I don't have to reach so far each time to get the stuffing in afterwards. So I'll show you what I mean. So for this one, I'm going to try this turning tube. Sometimes you have to just try it and see. So this goes in really nicely. Doesn't quite get to the edge, and that, you could do like that, but I'm going to try the size smaller to see how that one's looking, because I know this one will go through and get me right up to that tip. So then I'll go in there with this, and I kind of just push it up around. And sometimes it does take a couple of times, and sometimes it helps to like rest the bottom against your leg or something, but eventually you do get it. And so then at one point you can pull this out, and you're literally just moving this rod through that area. So see how I don't want to turn the whole thing out because it'll just take me a lot longer to stuff it. So I'm just going to go like that far. So and so I like to also use the turning tube and roll it along and against the seam to help press it out. And then to double check that you've got that bottom completely opened. So at this point I am going to start stuffing. I thoroughly enjoy using sheep wool stuffing. I'm just taking a very small piece to start. And I'm actually going to use this tool to help me stuff. This sheep wool, I actually picked it up on Facebook Marketplace. Somebody near me. Oh, did I lose it in there? Sometimes you gotta feel for where it is. Push that tool. The beginning is always the most challenging with this kind of thing. But somebody close by to me, I guess, had bought a mattress that was stuffed with sheep's wool, and they were not happy with it. There we go. And so they pulled all the stuffing out and were selling it. And it's just amazing. It's nice. It's not slippery like polyester stuffing, which is essentially plastic. It's got a bit of texture to it, so your tools kind of work, or they don't slip off of it as much as, like, if I were to do this with polyester stuffing, it actually would be a lot harder. Since this is a small shape that I'm doing, I am just taking small bits to start. And I'm not using my hemostats yet because I guess I could, because you want to still be able to open them in there. So you know what? I'm going to switch over. I didn't think that I'd be able to do that yet. Let's see. Although this might be a little trickier to get in. Sometimes I'll just go between tools and see what is working better for me at the time. I think I'll use it. And then the other thing is I can switch up. So I might actually switch to this tool and use that back end. And that might go quicker. For me, it's all about how am I going to get the nicest, smoothest stuffing the quickest way. Okay, and I always double check that the other side's looking good, and then I'll keep going. Okay, at this point, I've already stuffed up this far. I'm starting to get close to where I had turned out, so I'm just going to pull a little bit further to expose a bit more area. All right, and it's time now for me to pull this down a little bit more. You can see I'm starting to get a lot of space in there. So at this point, I might switch to the hemostats. And again, just work with a small bit at a time. You can go right in there. When you get in position, you just open them up and the grip goes away. And then I'm going to actually very shortly, like now, I'm going to switch and turn out this bottom part, which is a much longer curve than what we just worked with. And I'm actually going to see if I can do it with the hemostats. I don't think I can, because I think this might just get too tight up there in order to be open. Yeah, see, I can't open up my grips in order to grab it. So I'm going to stick with the tubes. And I'm going to use that small set again, and I'll just show you again how I do that. So this, I'm pushing all the way up. You can see all my clips that I did along here. And I'm going to start it there and get it in there and push it around. There you go. And again, I'm not going to do the whole thing. I'm going to pull this out before it gets lost in there. I find if you can stuff one of these moons, you can pretty much stuff anything. These moons and a tiny set of hands, those are, and the hands, I tell you, I still struggle with some hand patterns. I'm not very good at it, but I do keep trying. So this one, you can tell it's even smaller down in there. So this side's going to take a little longer to stuff, but I'm going to do it in the same way. Just make sure I've got a bit of an opening in there to put the stuffing through. Okay, so now I've got this whole area stuffed. I probably could have done a better job here, but it's not bad. Now I'm coming down into my first little cornery thing. I don't know what you want to call it. First little tricky spot. It's not that bad, this first one. But I'm just going to show you. I take my fine tool and I'm just going to run over it and make sure that I've got it all pulled out to the seam, which I do. And then I believe there's another one coming up right here. So I'm just going to go along gently, like I don't want to blow through. And I'm just going to poke that through. There we go. So I got those two little areas to stuff. I'm going to go a little bit further with my tube, and let's see, at some point I might switch to the hemostats. Okay, I've got my first little bump out stuffed, and I'm going to move my way down to this next one. So you'll see I'm just coming up to that little jut out, and I'm purposefully just trying to get some stuffing right in there, which I'm doing. Okay. Get a little bit more in that spot to do it nice and tight, or firm, I should say. Okay, that's looking good. So let's see what else we've got here. It looks like there might be another something coming up. Switch over to this tool to see. Yep, there's something. I don't care about my pencil line showing because this is going to be painted afterwards anyways, but there's another little one there. This side is all smooth. All right, and then you can see how I've got a little, that could be stuffed a little bit more. So I'm actually going to take this small tool and try to push that in there a little bit better, and that seems to be working. So sometimes you just need to switch back and forth between tools, see what's working in a space. Okay, but I'm definitely going to have to add more in there before I keep going. And now to really get it in that little spot, I'm going to try to go in with a smaller tool and actually guide some of the stuffing that's already there in that little jut out, which seems to be working nicely. So then what we have is a bit of an open area. I'm pretty much down to the end of needing to use the turning tube. So now I can definitely switch over to hemostats. I can get them in nicely. I've got nice movement. So you can just watch how I do that. So I'm going to pick up a bit of stuffing, put it in, and I can just use these almost like fingers. You could probably get in there with your finger too. Mine are a little big, so this works better, at least for this part. And I like it because you can really manipulate where you want the stuffing. We're still just working with small pieces because it will give you a better shape in the end. Okay, so I've got it stuffed up into there. So now I can turn out the rest of this. This nose, I can just use my thumb. If I need to, I could throw the turning tube in there to turn that out. But I feel like there's still a little more complexity in there. So I'm going to take my turning tube here, and again, I'm just going to push out the seam. I'm not pressing too hard, but I'm just making sure that I have the whole area perfectly turned out, so I'm not missing any of those little jut outs. So up here I can see there's something. There we go. See, and these shapes would not come out so nice and in line with the original shape if I had not clipped the seams. So clipping your seams is incredibly important in this. I'm flipping over to the bottom, and there we go. Those are those two little teeth in this pattern. All right. So that's the rest of what we have to work on. So my point of attack is I'm probably going to go in. I'll get this nose done. That I can probably just do with my finger. And then come into these other areas with some smaller tools. Okay, and then the next spot I'm going to address is this little jut out here. I'm going to start using my hemostats for that. Okay, and I'm just going to show you. So again, I've got a wrinkle there. I didn't do a very good job stuffing it. So I'm just got my hemostats. I'm grabbing a bit of stuffing and I'm pulling it down into that little jut out as best as I can. Some of these are quite difficult to stuff, but this is how I would do it. So you can see I'm starting to get some in there. and pushing it all really tight in behind. That's looking good. All right, so now I'm going to switch and do this bottom little area, and then I'll fill in all of this just with my fingers because I think it can get in there. All right, so these are two really tricky spots. I'm just going to come in and see if I can pull a bit of extra stuffing down into them to help keep their shape. And then I'm pulling the rest of the stuffing in behind. So hopefully it stays in place. And I'll probably keep my finger there and switch to my hands and really stuff in behind. And I keep my fingers there to keep the stuffing from pulling back out at me. And I think I'm at the point where I'm actually going to finish this just using my hands. And every once in a while you may find again that the stuffing's coming out of a little area. So you can try to, well, you still can push it back in and keep going. Okay, I'm getting pretty happy with this. I'm just not liking this spot. So I'm going to use the hemostats to get back in there, shove it down a little bit more and add more stuffing. It's kind of just, this is why it takes time, is you kind of have to keep going back. But I like these because I can get down in that little area that's troubling me and actually push the stuffing down. And I mean, there's other stuffing tools you can use that do the same thing, but I just find I have so much control with these. To think I'm a dull surgeon when I'm working with these. All right, so that's pretty much it. Other than afterwards I'll have to close my seam. I might add a little bit more as I'm shutting that. But this is, the moon stuffed. And you can see how handy those tools are for it. And the next thing I'm going to show you is how to do that hand. Okay, so now we're going to work on this hand. So the first thing to do is I'm going to cut this out. And I am leaving a seam allowance, but quite a small one. The larger, or I should say the smaller an item that you are working on, you need to get that seam allowance down, because that fabric has to fit into this finger in order to turn it. So it gets tricky. Now here, I'm just going to come down like that, and I'm going to come back to that corner. I'm going to come from this side. Notice I did not stitch along here because the nature of this pattern, this is actually, these fingers are not stuffed. This is an Arley Berryhill pattern. This is the hand from his dearly departed. It's a great pattern if you ever want to try it. And the way that he does his hands is when you flip this out, you end up using pipe cleaner down the fingers, which is nice because then you don't have to stuff them. And then you do, though, put some stuffing into the hand. But this one's more about using the turning tubes, so I'm not actually going to stuff this with you. I'm just going to show you that. So I go quite close. You mind that my scissors, make sure you've got a good pair of scissors for this, because you really want it to clip in there. See what I'm doing? Around here too. And again, you don't want to, you got to be very careful. You do not want to clip through your seam. And I'm going to do this finger. And down here. And just kind of made a little V shape. Okay, up here. If you were to cut through a seam, you could, well, in this way, you could probably just go over that area with a few stitches on your sewing machine. You could try to hand stitch it. And then if the blowout happens when you've already turned this out and you're already starting to stuff, you can just hand sew it. I mean, it obviously, if you look closely, you will be able to see that something had happened there, but you can just fix it. All right. So for this, I'm going to see, this may work. This little tube. But you know what? I'm going to try these ones. I do find them a little tricky to use, but I should get better at them. Let's see which of these fits up. I guess it would be this one. That fits really well. And I might try this one. It may be too big, but we'll see. So I'm just going to go up finger by finger. Oh, I did it. Good. Okay, so that finger's turned out. Then coming up into this area, I may actually switch to my larger one for this double thing. Okay. And then the next finger, let's see if this one fits. No, I'm going to go back to this one. Okay. And then the last one. So I always turn all the fingers out before I turn out the whole hand on something like this. I may actually, let's just give this smaller size a try. Whoops. And sometimes it takes a few tries to get it going. Kind of have to work the fabric a little bit sometimes. All right, so I did that, and actually now I'm going to use my hemostats to pull these fingers through. There we go. So I am hoping you can see how handy all of this is. And now I'll go back in. This tool should be fine enough to make sure I've got all those spots pushed through. If I needed to, I could grab my smaller tool to do this. But that's pretty good. All right. So I really hope that this tutorial has helped you sort out the complications of using turning tubes, hemostats, when you want to use them, why you want to use them as part of your turning small things and stuffing arsenal of tools. If you enjoyed this video, can you do 3 things for me? Hit the subscribe button below. It is free, and if you subscribe, you'll be notified when I release a new video. And if you liked this video, I would love it if you could also click the like button below. It really helps me grow my channel, and YouTube will show my content to more people. And finally, if you know of someone who would enjoy this video content, could you share my channel with them? I would love to reach more people to help them along in their crafting journey. See you next time.